Hey everyone, today we're going to look at a left hand technique that's really applicable in, I'm not going to say every situation in piano, but in a lot of them. It's probably one of the most important things that a piano player can learn for the sake of making themselves sound good without having to have a band behind them. Kind of prerequisite knowledge would be your chords, your basic chords, your 3-note chords, and so triads, and potentially it's good to know your 7th chords as well, which are your 4-note chords. So what we'd be looking at would be things like, that's a C major chord, right? And we need to know how we name the parts of this chord. So just quickly I'll go over that. The first note of the chord we call the root. The next note of the chord we call the third. And then the next note we call it the fifth. We don't call it the root, the second, and the third because we're actually naming it based on the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Right? So 1, 2, 3, that's where we get the third, and then 4, 5, fifth. If it was an F major chord, we'd use the F major scale. 1, 2, third, fourth, and then fifth. And there is our F major chord, root, third, fifth. So we want to be comfortable with those terms because when we get our left hand up, we'll start now looking at the technique that pretty much every piano player should know and try to learn, and that is to use, in the left hand we'll play a root note with our pinky, and then a fifth with our second finger, and then another root note or the octave of that root note under the thumb, right? So pinky, second finger, thumb, root, fifth, root note, or I might just call it the octave at the moment. So root, fifth, octave. This shape is one of the really good things about it is that it's only playing the root and the fifth, right? And just a duplicate of the root. And if we look at a major chord, it has a root, a third, and a fifth. And then if we look at the minor chord, it has a root, a minor third, or flattened third, and a fifth. So that is to say it is the third note of the major scale flattened to get that minor third or the flattened third. But the root and the fifth are the same, right? Between a major and a minor chord. So there's only one note difference, and we're not playing that note in our left hand. So this shape will work whether you're playing a major or a minor chord, right? There's multiple ways that you can use this shape to your advantage. One would be, we'll play it all together, right? It gives this really strong sound, and we actually call this a power chord. This is where there's no third present in the chord. It's just the root, the fifth, and the root. And it's actually what guitar players do a lot, especially if they have a distortion sound on their guitars, electric guitars. Really prominent in rock music, and you might even see that on piano. Maybe I'll play like a C major chord up here really high, and the left hand's going to play the power chord. Maybe I'll drop that third out so it really has that power chord sound. Now the focus should be on the left hand there. Don't worry about what my right hand was really doing. It was the left hand that we're focusing on, right? There's that shape, root, fifth, and root. And then what I happened to do there is I went to a G major chord, right? Root note, here's the fifth of that chord, and here is the octave of that. And then A, same thing, root, fifth, root. F, root, fifth, root. So again, it's really handy to have your major chords and minor chords all understood so that these positions are a little bit easier to find on the piano. One thing that's really, really worth knowing about this shape, and this is a way that you can practice it, getting it under your hands as well. So that would be, the shape is the same everywhere on the piano except for a couple of spots, right? There's only like 2 notes where the shape changes. What I mean by the shape is like If we start here on C, it's a white note to a white note to a white note, and that distance between the fingers, right? It stays the same even if we go up chromatically to the next note on the keyboard, D flat. That distance between the fingers is exactly the same, and that's what I mean when I say the shape. The shape is the same. So if I close my eyes and I just move my hand up, my pinky up to the black note, and I keep all the distance of my fingers the same, I will get the root, the fifth, and the root from that D flat. The only difference now is that this is all black notes. But again, keep in mind, that's the shape. It's repeating. It's all white or it's all black. And that repeats the whole way up the piano until B flat and B. So here's the rule generally. The fifths and the octave shape, that will be this power chord shape basically. That will be consistent everywhere on the piano until we get to some kind of note name that has a B in it. B flat, if you look here, what's changed is suddenly it's black, white, black. The distance is still generally the same, but it's a slight adjustment for the fingers. So it's a little bit trickier for people to get used to. But yes, we're switching. We're going black, white, black. And then if we go to B, it's the opposite. We're going white, black, white, right? So the Bs and B flats are the ones that are the odd ones out. But it's really good info to know that those are the only cases where it's the odd ones out. Every other fifth on the piano, I'll take it back here, again, just to reiterate, they have the same shape and the same consistency of white notes or black notes. And then we get to B flat, this diagonal shape from black to white. Right, so we see this kind of diagonal movement across the keyboard from here to here, and then diagonal back up. And then it's the reversed for B. It's diagonal going upwards, and then diagonal back down to the root. So those ones have a diagonal kind of shape. Right? This is a really good way to practice this shape under your hands, is to just take that shape and just move it up one note at a time, chromatically. Chromatically meaning going through all the notes of the piano in order like this. Right? And then B flat and B, those are different. And coming back up, and then we'll now bring it back down the piano. And we're gonna go straight to B and straight to B flat. And then we're home free. It's all the same shape the whole way down. If you make a little mistake like I did there, where you smushed a couple of extra notes, that's fine. Just try and play it off and keep going. Right? Eventually you'll get much quicker at it. And that shape, we want this to become second nature under the hands. We want it to be muscle memory, locked in, ready to go. Another good way to do it would be to practice around the circle of fifths. C, G, D, A, E, here's B, then F sharp, D flat, A flat, E flat, here's B flat, and then F, and back to C, and you can keep looping that, right? That's going to train you to get used to these shapes while moving them distances, because that will happen a lot on the piano. You got to get used to moving them in big distances, making the jumps, because chord progressions won't always be doing this, right? Usually they're making jumps like that. So we want to be able to practice moving to them in isolation from a distance. That's where the circle of fifths is really useful. Cool, so that's your basic start to that. And then what I would suggest is practice arpeggiating them. So I'm gonna, if you'll see up here, there it is, I'm gonna put my sustain pedal down, and I'm gonna practice moving between these. And notice that I'm gonna push my keyboard back a little bit so you can see. Notice I can get a little bit of movement in the wrist swaying. And this is where it's extra useful if you have particularly small hands, and by chance, if you do struggle with that size, right, that reach there, you can still get away with arpeggiating this shape with the left hand, and you can use your wrist motion to make it easier, you know, to reach all the notes. And if that pedal's down, you'll hear all of them come out, right? So practice in different ways. Practice going up and practice going up and down. And I want you to think of these as usually thinking of them in the time base of eighth notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then you can think of them still as eighth notes on the way down as well. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So this shape gets you really far in piano. Right now on its own it doesn't necessarily sound like a whole lot, but what this serves as is a really good foundation to build things in the right hand with. So you can do a lot with the right hand. The next thing that I would suggest looking at is practicing playing the actual full chord that you're going for, whether it's major or minor, using the right hand above what you've already done here. So if we've got this root, fifth, and octave in the left hand, right? What I want you to practice doing, and this might feel weird at first if you're not used to it, I want you to use your right hand thumb to start on the third of the chord. So if we're playing a C major, third would be E, and then the fifth will go under the second finger, and then you can put your pinky up on the root note again, an octave again of the root note. So we'll have in the left hand this shape, and in the right hand we'll have this shape, which if you have learned your inversions, you'll recognize this as a first inversion chord. This is a first inversion C major. So your right hand is playing a first inversion C major chord in this instance, but you'll basically just be playing a first inversion of whatever kind of chord you're doing. If it's a minor, there you are. If I pull the left hand out, what we have left is a first inversion C minor chord. And that is to say that the C minor chord has been inverted so that we are now playing E flat as the lowest note in this particular hand. The chord is still a regular C minor because we've got our left hand doing this root, fifth root in the left at the bottom. So these are two ways of playing our major and minor chords here. Notice between the two shapes, all that's changing is where my thumb is, because remember what I said earlier, in a major and minor chord, the only difference is the third. And if we look at this voicing that we've created, so the way that we've spread out the notes of this chord, what we end up with is 3 root notes, 2 fifths, and only 1 third, which means to switch from a major or a minor chord, it's only up to that thumb. The shape is all the same, but it's just a matter of where you put your thumb. Of course, for something like C major here, we can just have our hands nice and equal in a row like this. But if we want to play C minor, we should actually slide our whole hand towards the back of the keys so that our thumb can rest nicely on that black note there. So you can see now my left hand's down here, but my right hand's all the way up here. So that's just good ergonomics for the piano. We want to learn how to shift our whole wrist upwards towards the back of the piano to be able to rest our thumb on black notes when we're playing chords, right? So I'm going to put my pedal back down here. And what you can do is often play that big chord and then use your left hand thumb to kind of bounce around and spell out again the time bass of the song, probably eighth notes in this case. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you could repeat or you could change chords there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and what you can often do is get a bit of movement in there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and Well, okay, look, that's getting a little advanced rhythmically, but I'm moving that thumb around within the scale that I'm in. And you can get some really cool sounds there. But that's extra. What I'm mainly focusing on is this shape in the left hand is really important, having these notes, right? And what you can then often do is arpeggiate that left hand, right? I'm just doing the root, fifth, and root shapes here. F, C, and F, that's the root, fifth, and the octave for an F major chord. And my right hand's playing the F major chord. And I might take it through different inversions. And then let's say G major. My left hand's playing the root, the fifth, and the root of the G major. And it's just arpeggiating it with eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That shape will get you really far. It's quite an essential thing to practice for piano if you want to sound really good. You can then, there's all sorts of ways to enhance upon this and to stick that into things in all sorts of different ways, right? Right there, I finished with going root. So like I started with the octave and then I went down to the fifth and then down to the root below that. Sometimes that can be a good little change up. I will be honest, for me it was just muscle memory because I've practiced it a whole bunch. It's probably not very easy to just pull out like that if you're not used to it. It'll take some time. But generally, I think you'll find a lot of use out of this motion. Just remember, a reminder, Bs and B flats are the ones where it's diagonal shaped, white to white, or black, white, black, right? So you'd have this going on a B, and this going on a B flat, right? I'll leave it there as the basics of the left hand root, fifth, octave motion. And maybe in a future video I'll go into some more applications of it and some variations of it. There was one that I put in there real quick. I did like this little walk down from the fifth to here. Suddenly that's no longer, this is a root, but that's not a fifth, that's a sixth. And then that's another octave of the root, right? So that's a different shape, but there are ways you can kind of walk between those to make things sound good, depending on where you are in your key, in your major scale. If that didn't make any sense to you, don't worry. It wasn't meant to be for this lesson anyway. So I should shush and say thank you very much for watching. And I hope that that is some useful information for you and can help you in your piano journey. Do feel free to ask me questions if you have any. All right. Thanks again for watching and good luck. Happy practicing.